Mincho who I'm with responds back in the same sort of like really long, like Ricola, right? Ricola.
Right.
And they're communicating with each other.
Yeah.
This was before cell phones.
That's right.
You know, Guatemala had just gotten out of its civil war, so there were no cell phones. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Unseen Impact. I once again, I'm honored to have my sidekick and wife, Kerri Resendiz. Welcome.
Hello.
Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about us.
Ooh.
And we're going to talk about kind of how we met.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about, to do that, we have to talk about the Peace Corps.
Awesome.
Because the two of us, Kerri and I, met as volunteers in Peace Corps Guatemala in 2002.
Well, you don't have to tell him the year.
He's
going to start doing math and realize ages.
Some time ago.
That's right, yeah.
Well, actually, I met Kerri in Miami a day before we flew into Guatemala.
Here we go.
But she apparently I wasn't enough to get her attention then. But anyway, so we're here to talk about that. And kind of some of the things I want to look at is that kind of what inspired us to join. Mm-hmm. Why Guatemala? That's an easy question for the listeners out there. Mm-hmm. Then what kinds of work did we do? Mm-hmm. Then getting a little bit deeper is kind of what sort of perspective when we were there did it give us on what we were going to be doing. Mm-hmm. And then now kind of what perspective has our experience there and our time since then given us, how has that impacted our perspective since doing it?
Well, and maybe just for those in the back, what Peace Corps is.
Oh, so the Peace Corps is a program. It's it's an agency within the U.S. government, mm-hmm. and what they do is they send. It's a very small program comparatively, but it really packs a huge punch for what they have. Mm-hmm. When we were there, they said it was about the yearly budget was about the cost of a fighter jet.
Right.
Whereas you had, at that point, I think it was about 7,000 volunteers.
Across the world.
Across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to help the poorest of the poor. Mm-hmm. And so it's international development work. Mm-hmm. And what the Peace Corps does is they send, Americans, typically like post-college.
Or somebody with 3 years of like technical skills.
Yeah.
Masons, construction workers, etc.
And then you'd get the gray hairs, which the
retirees. Yeah.
But they go down. You serve 2 years. They give you before that. They give you about 3-4 months of training, mm-hmm. and then they put you out in communities. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with a formal group, sometimes with just like a community leader, and you're there just to do what you can.
Well, Peace Corps gives us training on specific programs. Of course, we all start by like programming people's clickers for their TVs because the instructions are in English, but that's how you build relationships, right?
Yeah. Don, I can't remember what that one guy, Don something, Don, but yeah, that was, I did the one. I think you did a bunch of them.
Oh, I did a bunch of them. That's how I got into a lot of houses.
The universal remote.
The universal remote for the win.
It's all in English.
That's right.
But beyond training that, what the Peace Corps does is so you have kind of these set ideas that you're going to do. But here's one thing that's kind of interesting. So the Peace Corps has this sort of kind of cookie cutter way of doing it. But just because, whether you're supposed to concrete floors, water projects, build efficient wood burning stoves.
Youth programs. Agriculture programs.
Mm-hmm. But still, regardless of what you were taught to do, what was more important is that once you got out into the community, that you had to do an assessment of what were the needs. Mm-hmm. So even if you were given this, okay, here's what you're supposed to do. My left hand for those in the audio world is rolling over here. You were taught this. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter if the community needed something else.
Right. A lot of times you go in and you're like, hey, I'm going to build you a stove. And they're like, but we don't have any water. Yeah. And you're like, oh, geez. Okay, well, we can do a water catchment system first. I'm not as good at those. Yeah. But then you have your in.
You have your in. Mm-hmm. You get like what we've talked about here is that you trust is not a series of words. It's actions.
It's earned.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into it? what was it? What inspired you to join the Peace Corps?
Well, I had a friend and her mom had done the Peace Corps, and so that's how I'd heard of it, because otherwise, I guess when I got to college, you see like the posters and you're like, oh, what's that? So I remember in college, I went to a talk, and there was a returned Peace Corps volunteer talking about his experience, and I was like, that sounds really cool. And then after I graduated, I was working for about a year, and I said, well, it's now or never. So I submitted my application. I was recruited out of the Boston office.
That's a big one.
So what happens is when you get recruited for Peace Corps is they don't want people from the same city, right? So it's going to be one person from Boston and one person from Montana. Yeah. And so it took me a year. I had to wait a year. Very handsome person from Montana. So handsome. So it took a year to get into Peace Corps, but I wanted an adventure. I wanted to learn to speak another language, and I wanted to like do something and learn something new and meet new people. And, and it ended up being all those things.
Mine is very similar. And then the other thing for me, what I liked about it, because I looked at the time they had a book. Now I'm sure you can find it online.
You can do it online.
A book that was called Alternatives to the Peace Corps.
Oh, right.
A very, very catchy phrase. And I looked through all of those, and it made me want the Peace Corps more, because one is that the U.S. government is taking care of you, right? And so if you recall, not long into our service, there was some riots or something going on, and like the Marines showed up in this town and scooped up these volunteers, put them into, the black tinted windows, Suburbans, and drove them off. Right. So you have the security of the U.S. government.
Yeah, it was safe. Like I remember like a little bit of our frustration initially was that safety was the number one thing, where we were like young volunteers, like, let's go. And they were like, no, you're going to be very careful. Mm-hmm. We're going to keep an eye on you. And in retrospect, if I think about like young people going now, thank goodness. Right? Yeah. Thank goodness that's like the number one thing.
Absolutely. Similar for me, I had, shout out Woody Wright, who is my parents' friend. I had some friends of mine, Les Peterson, he was at Costa Rica. Chris Hunter, he was in Iran.
Oh my goodness.
And then
crazy.
I think that it was like right in the late 70s. So he married another Peace Corps volunteer.
Oh, no way.
She had finished her service, but he got evacuated when all that stuff went down.
Okay.
So I had the same sort of thing, and I wanted to get out. Coming from Montana, there wasn't many people. So I was like, I applied at the end of January, and I think May we were, touching down in Guatemala City. Mm-hmm. And then Guatemala is because you don't really have much of a choice. You can kind of choose certain areas.
You choose the region. You can put down like your top 3 regions of the world. So you can put in like Latin America or Africa. And
so we get there. We're in Guatemala. We do the training. Beautiful place called Santa Lucia Milpas Altas.
Yeah.
Tall corn. Mm-hmm. What did you do? I know what you did. But what was tell those who don't know what you did?
My project was appropriate technology for family health, and we worked a little bit like MacGyver, where you'd go to a home, and they'd be like, well, we have this tire in this wood and some rope. And so we'd be like, well, we can make a bomba de agua, and you could help them to build a water pump. But a lot of what I did was to build stoves, estufas mejoradas. And so they're like metal plancha stoves where you have the smoke go out the roof, as opposed to like this open fire with the smoke in the home.
So traditional in Guatemala, you'd have, there's a huge population of Mayan folks that have been there for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. The women would you'd have these 3 large rocks. They'd have this huge clay plate called a comal, and they would just cook in a room with an open fire. Mm-hmm. So it's just a terrible waste of wood, which is a scarce resource. And then all of that smoke. And so years and years, and they're down on their knees. Mm-hmm. So all sorts of physical problems that come with that.
Mm-hmm. So it would improve the health of the family in their home. And that was the goal of my project.
And I remember one project. What was it? Las Lagunitas?
Yeah.
So remember that you had to tell us about that one.
So we used to have to hike up a mountain, and it would take us like 45 minutes or an hour.
Because there was no road.
There was no road, and so we had to get all the supplies up there. And as a woman, I couldn't go up there by myself. So I had to rely on a male Peace Corps volunteer to come to my community and to help me by going up with me, so I wasn't alone. And also, we always worked in pairs anyway, so it was helpful. But we would go to... we'd go up the mountain and build the stoves.
And we came back a few years later, and this one, because I remember when we built the stove and it was out in the middle of just the open.
Right, in the middle of our courtyard.
And I just thought, well, this is going to be a waste.
Yeah.
We go back 5 years later. She's got like a kitchen built around it. She's tiled around it. It was beautiful.
She built a whole house around it, which was really cool.
And then so I went out into one really, really far part of the country that nothing was really. They were devastated by a few of the hurricanes that had come through, but it was a tiny community. They didn't even have its own market. And then ultimately another spot opened up kind of center of the country where they were doing water systems. And so I built a bunch of water systems.
Right, but you were the only volunteer who was doing that. There was one volunteer before you.
Yeah.
Nate. He had started the water projects, and then you came in and did the water projects, which I think is pretty cool, right? Like, it
was great.
Whenever we're like, oh, Rory did gravity flow water systems,
I know.
You're like, that's insane to think about. You like go out and find where the water's bubbling out of the ground. And
well, they would find. Here's the beauty: is that in those communities, they know where their water is.
That's right.
But I remember somebody said, "Well, what did you do? Are you an engineer?" No, I'm far from an engineer. But I read a book. And I think it was something about like gravity flow water systems. And it was written by a guy who was in the Peace Corps, and I think in the late 70s, early 80s in Nepal.
Oh, no way. I didn't realize he was a Peace Corps volunteer.
Yeah. And you could read this book. You could know nothing about the construction of it, about what a spring was, about spring capturement, the transmission line, the distribution lines, all that stuff. If you know nothing about it and if you follow this book, you could do it. Luckily, I was the second or third volunteer there. There was a group that is kind of helping out, but I'd go out and actually do the survey. Then I'd do the design, and I had an Excel sheet that would tell me for your hydraulics and all that stuff. But for me, it was great because people really wanted it.
Right. Well, and you used to hike through the woods, right? With like the dude in front of you with the machete, like clearing the way.
So it would be me in this little Abney level, this little thing. An Abney level, what I'd do is you'd have somebody with a stick that was at my eye level. And so I'd have one guy holding some stuff for me at my right. And then one guy holding the tape measure. There was another guy as far of a point as we could go, anywhere from 4 to 20 meters, that somebody else holding the tape measure, and then another person holding that Abney level. And then I'd shoot it, and we'd just go boom, 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 spend all day, a couple days. I'd go back.
But I think what was interesting is how you would find each other out there.
Oh, yeah. So one time we show up, and this guy takes me somewhere, and I'm thinking, I'm like, are you like going to murder me out here? Like, what is going on?
Woods, right.
And all of a sudden I hear, and it's this big, beautiful, open canyon, and I just hear this kind of like this noise, and I don't think anything of it. And then Mincho, who I'm with, responds back in the same sort of like really long, like Ricola, right? Ricola.
Right.
And they're communicating with each other.
Yeah.
This was before cell phones.
That's right.
Guatemala had just gotten out of its civil war, so there were no cell phones when we were there. But it was kind of interesting to see how that went.
Yeah, so that community, they didn't want a water system.
And that one, it had to do with like they didn't want a water system. What they needed was a bridge. But they ended up.
So how did that happen though? Because if you're like the water system person, then you did a bridge.
The group that I worked with did water systems, and then they had a group of engineers that would come down and build bridges.
Oh, that's right. The other.
So it was what I did was, and this is in the law, in life, and anything. I made the connection between those building the bridges, and from Marquette University in Wisconsin, and the community. And we made that connection. This community that was a 45-minute walk from the main road, then had a bridge, and that was built a little bit after we left. But it's funny because we went back just about 7 months ago, and since then, this community, they're working with the same group from Marquette, and I think he said they'd built 20 bridges, 50 schools.
So cool.
Something else. And so what that makes me think about is that when you were there, how did you kind of perceive what your life and career was going to be after the Peace Corps as a result of the Peace Corps? No.
I didn't really think about it. Remember, there were volunteers who started and during training, they're like, well, I'm going to go to this Ivy League and I have this plan to take. And I was like, oh man, I don't really have a plan.
I just want to make it through tomorrow.
I just wanted to get through Peace Corps and be present. And I wasn't necessarily very concerned about what was going to happen in the 2 years when it was over, and then when we were done, I just continued wanting to do more of service work. And so, that was sort of a natural transition, but I don't know that I was the person who was like very calculated in my next step after Peace Corps.
Well, and I don't think I was calculated either, but just looking at how it impacted your view of the world. I think maybe a better way to look, the better question is this. here we are. I won't say how many years or decades later.
500 years later.
But not quite 500. Looking back on it, how do you think that it did kind of sway where you went or what you did?
Well, I think back to like the idea of, we came in with an idea of what we needed to do because that's what Peace Corps trained us to do. And then when you get to your community and you're just doing what they need, I think that really applies to everywhere. You come into something and you think, okay, I'm going to do this. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm not, because this is where they need you to do the work, or this is what needs to get done. I just feel like that building like the trust and the relationships, I think that's sort of the first thing you should do in all your work.
In everything. What I'm hearing is this, is you look at, regardless of what you're going in to do, it's about taking an assessment of what you've got. It's about getting to talk with people, truly talk with them, not with a clipboard.
Or listen.
Listen to people. What are their real issues? What are they coming at? And then formulate some sort of plan. And all of that requires a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And that's the easy thing to do, is to come up before and say, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and just come in and try to bang it out. But it's not going to work.
No.
The more difficult thing, but the thing that's right, is to do the investigation on the front end. Listen to the people, and then try to achieve the results of what they're looking for.
Well, working with them, right? Because like the stove project, it was always about, I'll build the stove in this house with you and the neighbors, and then you're going to all build the stove next door. Well,
I think that's a really cool point too, because you think about the stove. So with the stoves, you would have typically the community, they were giving labor. Mm-hmm. They would get, the municipality would give or provide for some of the materials, mm-hmm. and then maybe some of the sand, some of the concrete, but the community had to bring it all up. So they
mm-hmm.
had some skin in the game.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same thing here. Mm-hmm. Is that you get, from looking at it from a personal injury perspective, from a law perspective, how does this relate to the law?
Right.
Looking at it is that, the client has to want this more than I want it. If I want the end result more than the client, then it's just not going to work.
Right. And also I think just in my observations of your practice, just the relationships that you have with your clients, I think you've learned throughout the years, if you have a good relationship with your client and they can freely share with you and vice versa, and then I feel like that case always goes better.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean?
Like anything in life.
Yeah.
Anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of wild, and I know you get on me for this all the time, but it's like the book, Everything I Need to Know in Life I learned in kindergarten or whatever that was, is like everything I need to know in life I learned in the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. Right? Because so some of it is you show up, or at least I showed up,
mm-hmm.
Didn't speak any Spanish,
right.
Didn't have any understanding of the culture. I got the culture a little bit more coming from Montana, because whether I knew it or not, I came from a rural area.
Right.
And so Guatemala was a rural area, so I kind of got it. But at any given point in the beginning, I was operating on really understanding maybe 8 to 10% of what was going on. So
right.
There's 90% of the stuff happening, and I have no clue. Mm-hmm. And here I made it.
Right.
I did well. And what it forces you to do is you have to stop, slow down, and really look at, who is this person? What do they need? What is their life like? Who is that person? Got to find out. And then all of them are related in these small communities you'd go to. Mm-hmm. And so you had to know, if you did something over here, it could upset somebody, 3-4 houses down the line. Mm-hmm. And I see that as a positive consequence, a learning experience from
mm-hmm.
it. The other thing that I see, kind of looking at what is the, what is the unseen impact of the Peace Corps, and here we are all of these years later, and I'm curious your take on it. But my take is that some of the kind of the biggest thing with the Peace Corps, and now, is the impact of our relationships with the folks that we were friends with there, not just volunteers, but Guatemalans mm-hmm. that we've stayed in contact with, because we go down there once or twice a year. To me, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Now with social media, I'm friends with them on Facebook, all these things. People who,
right.
They grew up, wandering around in the woods with no electricity. Now we're sharing photos on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is kind of that unseen impact, the biggest sort of impact that you have seen because of our time there?
Well, I think there's a million things, but I think the impact, when I think about when we go back and we bring our kids,
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the impact it sort of has on them, and just kind of like showing them the world and how other people live, and just the connection that we have to that country that we get to go back to, that feels a lot like home. And it was our first home. And so it feels like home when we go back and we bring our kids and they get to see the communities and like know that other people don't live the same way that we live.
Yeah.
And I think that impact, I think that's the one I like the most.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. It kind of makes me think about what the Peace Corps tenets, right? It's not, you know, they refer to us, when you're done, you're not an ex-Peace Corps volunteer. You're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, right. The RPCV. Because what the idea is that you never stop doing what you were doing there. You're just doing it in a different area. You're doing it in a different place. And here we are, I won't say how many years later.
But like for you in law, so what do you think? Like, how do you see the impact?
Well, I think one is that, you know, we live on the border, so there's a lot of Spanish speakers.
Well, that's what's really interesting, because I remember like when you started practicing law in Spanish, and I thought, well, that's kind of badass, because you know, that's a whole, like you might speak Spanish, but it's a whole different vocabulary.
It took a lot of dictionary time.
Right,
Google Translate.
Yeah, so there's the unseen impact, right? So you kind of understand culturally how to interact.
I think it's culturally. So everything comes down to trust. Everything comes down to trust. And so when you can take the time and try to understand somebody, listen to them, and then when they feel as though they're heard, that is where the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up this wonderful session of Unseen Impact with the now not new sidekick, co-host,
Ta-da.
Kerri. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So for all of you out there, if you like this and you want to have more of it, you can listen to all of these Unseen Impacts on your favorite listening platform. You can watch it on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, Rory Law Firm. Go find us, follow us, like us, and you'll get this and much more.